Love is our evidence of salvation. Love is our evidence that God dwells in us and abides in us. Love is our evidence that we belong to God. As we continue on through 1 John, in chapter 4, we see that John is continually speaking on love and what it means to us in every aspect of our lives, because love in a believer's life should affect every aspect of our lives. And if we belong to God, if we are His children, then we should be loving each other with His love, an unconditional love, a selfless love, love that doesn't think about self, doesn't think about what I benefit, doesn't even care if I benefit or not. It's a giving love, a love that thinks about giving. And today, we'll see that that love is evidence that we truly belong to God. And the world around us will see that God is truly alive and working and living in us. 1 John 4, verse 12. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God abides in us, and His love is perfected in us. The Bible is clear. God is spirit, and there is no way that we can see God here on earth with our eyes. We can't see God. The Old Testament says they saw God. These expressions of that they saw God. They saw God's glory. They saw God, they saw a vision of something that represented God. They saw God's character in something, but they did not see God Himself. God is spirit, and so we can't see Him. However, if God lives in us, we can know that He does live in us. We can see, in a sense, that He does live in us by our loving of each other. We love one another, and we can see that God is alive in us. If we love one another, if we can see that, then we know that God is present there and God's love is present there. By loving one another, we're able to see an invisible God and know that He is here. No one can claim to have seen God the Father, because John plainly states that no one has seen God at any time. Yet there are many people that say, I saw God. Paul was clear in writing in 1 Timothy 1:17, now to the King eternal, immortal, invisible. And Jesus declared of God the Father that God is spirit in the Gospel of John, chapter 4, verse 24. God is spirit. Meaning that God the Father has no tangible body which may be seen. So if anyone says, I've seen God, let me tell you, don't listen to what they're about to say, because they have not seen God. Maybe they've seen the glory of God. Maybe the Lord gave them a vision of something, but if they say that they've seen God, then do not listen to what they're about to say, because it is not biblical, because God is invisible. With our human eyes, God has not allowed us to see Him with our human eyes. もし私たちが互いに愛し合うなら、神は私のうちにおられる。If we love one another, God abides in us, John says. If we love one another, God abides in us. This is the greatest evidence of God's presence and work among us. Love. No one has seen God at any time. Since no one has seen God at any time, this provides evidence for the presence of God, His love. John, the Gospel of John, chapter 13, verse 35, says, by this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Jesus said that if you have love for one another, the people around you will see and know that, oh, he has that love, she has that love that Jesus had, that love that we had never seen before, that love that Jesus had. So this person must be a disciple of Christ. This person must belong to Christ because they are moving and acting and speaking in the same character and heart of Jesus, which is love. Some people think that the greatest evidence of God's presence and the greatest evidence of his work is power, authority, miracles. Some people think that the greatest evidence of God's presence or work or his popularity, where people are gathered. Well, God must be there as well. Some people think that the greatest evidence of God's presence and work is passionate feelings and getting all emotional. And God, well, there's got to be something that God is doing there because look at them. They're getting very passionate and emotional right now. But the greatest evidence of God's presence and work is love. Where God is present and working, there will be love. You see, because there were times when Jesus seemed weak. Jesus took on the form of man. He took on weakness. He seemed like he was lacking in power. But he was always full of love. Even when he looked weak. Even when he was experiencing our weakness in our place, he was still full of love. That never changed. Even when he wasn't popular. When those that followed him at one time turned against him and there was no one standing up for him. When he wasn't popular, he was still full of love. In fact, Jesus ran away from popularity most of the time, right? He ran away from it. There are only a few times when we see that Jesus welcomed it. But we see that popularity comes and quickly goes. Because soon after, those same people turned against Jesus. But one thing remained, and that is love. There were times when Jesus didn't inspire passionate feelings in people. But Jesus was always full of love and acting and moving and speaking in love. Love was the constant. Jesus walked this earth. You look at his life and you say, what is the one constant thing? Miracles? No. Power? No. Passion? No. Zeal for the people around him? No. The zeal that, the people around him, he stirred up this. No. Popularity? Nope. What was it? A constant place to live? Nope, because he didn't even have a bed for it. He didn't have a place to rest his head. One constant thing he had. Family? Nope, because they said, come back. You're going crazy. Come back. Leave what you're doing right now. You're acting like a madman. Come back. Nope, it wasn't family. It wasn't support of other people. It was love. His love was the constant, the greatest evidence, the presence and the work of God and Jesus Christ is love. We can be weak. We can, if we tell each other that, hey, look, you're saved if you have God's power in you, then what happens when you're weak? And God allows us to be weak. He allows us to be tested. What happens then? Then you say, oh, I must not be saved. Because power is not a constant. It's not a good way to measure whether we're saved or not. It's not evidence of salvation. What is evidence of salvation? Love. That is a constant, something that can work in us when things go well, when things go badly, when we are surrounded by many people, when we are not surrounded by many people, when we are with much, when we are without much. Love can be constant in those times. Love is the evidence. The greatest evidence of God's presence and God's work. His love has been perfected in us, it says here. John says, his love, when we love one another, his love has been perfected in us. What does this perfected in us mean? Well, the Greek word is teleo. And this word teleo doesn't mean perfect. It means mature or complete. If we love one another, then the love of God is mature and complete in us. Like fruit. I love growing fruit, and so here's another fruit example. Where's the best place to eat fruit? Where's the best place to get fruit from? You go to the store? Well, which store? It really doesn't matter which store you go to, unless you go to a really, really local place. But usually, when you go to the store and you get fruit, you're not getting the best. Why? Because in order for them to have time to harvest it with all the other fruit, to harvest it, box it, ship it, for the store to have time then, put it on the shelves, for the people to come to buy it over the next few days, and then for them to take it home and wait till they have time to eat it. If the farmer was to wait to harvest it when it was completely ripe, then it would be rotten by the time it got to home. It'd be rotten on the shelves, right, of the stores. So they have to harvest them early. And what happens when you harvest early? With fruit, you miss out on all of the sugar, all of the natural sugar that gets just poured into that thing, or the kind of the end process of the ripening process just gets full of sweet goodness. And you lose that, so you go to the store and you go, oh, okay, yeah, oranges are really, acidic, and you get like a kiwi, it's super acidic, and you get a banana, it's not really sweet, and you get apples that aren't very sweet, but they have texture. But Japan is pretty good about making sure that the fruit is pretty sweet. That's why the fruit's pretty expensive in Japan. It's done really well. They put a lot of time into each fruit, and they even write on the packages. If you read Japanese, on some of the packages, they'll write the level of sweetness in this pack. So they test, from that bunch that they'd harvest, they test the sweetness, how much sugars are in them, and they'll write like 13 degrees of sweetness in these strawberries, or in this orange, it's like 15 degrees or the level of sweetness or whatnot. So Japanese they are concerned with the sweetness. And if you've ever had a Japanese apple, you just can't go back to the American regular store about kind of cheaper apples, right? I have gone back and I buy a bunch of fruit, and we ate them. We're like, where's the taste? There's texture but no taste. Buy a peach, but there's no peach inside the peach. The Japanese apples, if you get a good Japanese apple, they have this thing called honey inside of it. And you cut it open and you see that it's kind of it looks like the middle part is kind of wet. Like it's a different color than the rest of it. It's kind of like I don't know how you say it. It's just, they call it honey. And that part is like killer sweet. And you get that from, farms and things like that really focus on getting those things super sweet or whatnot. And though the apples are so sweet, it tastes like candy. But if you grow fruit at home, you get the sweetest of all fruits, because you can leave that fruit on the tree until you better eat it today, otherwise it's going bad type of situation, right? It's fully, completely ripe, and you take that in, you go, I'm not really a fan of oranges, I'm not a fan of pineapples, not that big fan of bananas or, other citrus, because they're just too acidic and sour. But when you grow them at home and you leave them on the tree long enough, they are sweet. It tastes like, many times you know what tang is, right? Okay, is that still a thing? I don't know if that's even legal to sell anymore. I don't know what's inside that stuff. But tang is just pure, just sweetness, right? Well, oftentimes the fruit at home, when we grow it at home, it's like you eat it and drink it. You eat it and it's like, that tastes like tang. It shouldn't, but it tastes like tang. There's nothing bad. This is natural. But it's so packed of sugars because we left it on the tree till it was completely ripe. What happens when we're loving one another? That is evidence that the fruit of God's love in your life is being ripened. It's ripe. in your life, right? That it's maturing in your life. When someone tastes of that love, when you're loving each other and someone comes into the fellowship and they experience that love, they taste that love, and then all of a sudden they go, man, that is one ripe Christian. That is one mature Christian. That tastes so good. This love, this tastes so good here. It's not power. It's not popularity. It's not passionate feelings that prove that you are a mature Christian. Because you can be immature, but show all of those other things. But love, no. No, loving one another like Christ loved the church, that's a love that only comes by maturity. And that love is sweet, sweet to the mouth of believers. That love is sweet to the mouth of people around that see and experience that love in your life, because that is God's work being matured in your life like a fruit being ripened on a tree. It tastes sweet, it tastes good, and it's proof of maturity. His love has been perfected, matured, ripened in us when we love one another. That's proof of maturity. Not knowledge, not power, not popular, not passionate feelings, but love. Acts of love. 1 John 4:13 through 16. By this we know that we abide in him and he in us, because he has given us his Spirit. And we have seen and testify that the Father has sent his Son to be the Savior of the world. Whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God, God abides in him and he in God. So we have come to know and believe the love that God has for us. God is love, and whoever abides in God, God abides in him. Whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. Other than loving one another, there is other evidence that God is in us and working in us. And that evidence is the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit, if someone were to say, show me, prove that God is in you, prove that God is alive, you really couldn't give them tangible proof and say, look, here's a picture of me and God, right? But by the work of the Holy Spirit in you, you can give them evidence that God is at work in your life. You can't see the Spirit in your life, but you can see the work of the Spirit in your life. And if you're a believer, then the Spirit is working in your life, and you will experience what Galatians 5:22 and 23 explains. Galatians 5:22 and 23. But the fruit of the Spirit, right? It's none of those things that we explained before, but it is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. All of these things are wrapped up in the first one, love. Because in Corinthians we see that within love, that love is all of these things. And if there's no law against it, that means this is the top law of all, so to speak. That's love. God's love, us speaking in God's love, us moving and acting and taking the attitude of God's love is evidence that God's Spirit is working in our lives. All of these things should be active in our lives that we read here in Galatians, and that is proof that we are God's children, because the Holy Spirit is working in us to make us look more like our Father. He's changing us to look more like our Father. And so when we give our tongues over, when we give our bodies over in the things we say, in the things that we do, to loving our brothers and sisters, then we are giving evidence and showing evidence that we are the children of God. And to a world that doesn't know God, we are giving them proof that God is alive.